Here's something every car nut needs in his shop. A damn traffic light. Hello, red light district. So I'm sitting there on the marketplace and Kijiji and Craigslist and whatever else, and I just so happened to find this traffic light. And this thing is absolutely massive. For anybody who has ever had one of these in their shop or, whatever, they look small coming from up top if you're driving under them. Well, let me tell you, this unit here is 4 feet in length. When you factor in the conduit up top, there's a steel conduit where it actually bolts to a pole. And, well, there is a wire up there, but I mean, all the wires have been cut. So all we have here is an old junction block. There's no wires in it anymore. A lot of that junction block would have been hooked up to a controller of some sorts to make this traffic light work. And of course, there's no controller with it. That would have stayed with whatever intersection this light came from. So I just have this hooked direct. I'm just testing it out. I don't have green. I have amber, but there's a triangle kind of missing out of it. And red is fully working. So I'm going to see if I can get one from this manufacturer. But yeah, that is bright. Bright enough. So anyway, I'm going to put a controller in it. And after I'm done that, I'm going to designate a spot to hang this thing. The problem is I don't know where. I can't really hang this on the wall like what I was hoping to do. I'm going to have to mount it from the ceiling, and it's got to be somewhere where nobody's going to bonk their head on it. So I really don't know where to put it. So anyhow, got a project here, a quick project, and going to make this traffic light do some stuff here, rather than just stay red, because that's kind of boring. We run the red lights around here. And we got a couple LEDs out. Poop. Oh well, it's better than nothing. I'm quite happy with that. I'll just live with it, I guess, but I have absolutely no green at all. So I'm going to have to get some parts for this. Okay, so I got the traffic sequencer here, sent all the way from Maryland, the state of Maryland, Gallic Electronics. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. So I got that in a little, parcel, not even 0.3 of a pound. So it's just a motherboard chip. Inside the bag comes with little adhesive brackets and some zip ties. So this is all it is for anybody who wants to fret around with something like this. So these here are for your red, yellow, and green. It does say on the chip. I believe this one here is the green, yellow, and the red. So very straightforward. This is your line in. So and your load. Well, that's your neutral. So I don't have the proper wire for using this yet, and not only that, the green doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up just with this old wire here that I have sitting here. I'm just going to try it with this and plug it directly into the wall. And once I get the green light, so you can tell there's water in the bottom of this. That's more than likely what caused its demise there. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to just mount this, and here's those stems. There's the fourth one there. So I'm going to designate a spot inside the light itself, and I'm trying to do a little bit of a demonstration with it. So I'm going to try and clean this up. It doesn't come with alcohol wipes. This junction block doesn't need to be used anymore, so I'm just going to bypass it. There's no need to even bother with it anymore. And it's fairly corroded too, so anyhow. So yeah, I'm going to clean that up with just some alcohol wipes and find a spot for it. I'm not sure where I'm going to mount it, if I'm going to mount it here or here. According to the manual, it says that it produces a little bit of heat, and I'm not totally sure where I'm going to put this unit yet. A few of my drunken friends were actually mentioning that I should put it outside in front of the door, and that way customers know where my shop is. Okay, just removing the old junction block. I've decided I'm not going to bother using it at all. It's actually not in too bad a shape, considering the light is probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years old maybe. But anyhow, your traffic light, if you do buy one used, and it is actually an authentic traffic light, there's a good chance that there is one in there. So, but in any event, this will be our new junction block. So, this is our traffic light controller. I actually didn't realize that it was embossed, these two mounts here. So I'm going to try and see if I can maybe mount it to that, and that way it has a bit of a gap behind it. But the thing is that these mounts here actually will give you that. So maybe I'll just mount it above that, and I'll just leave that all out of there. So anyway, I believe this one was for our green. If I open up this, like so, there we go. Yeah, so that brown wire was for our green, and this is for our amber. We know it works to some extent, and I guess the neutral wire is still inside there. So, so anyway, the leads are put fairly long, which is good. I'll leave them there like that just in case I ever have to replace a lamp. These aren't like incandescents where you can just change the bulb and you know, you'll be on your merry way. The problem with this is that they're LEDs, and if they burn out, you got to replace the entire module, they call it. Problem with this company is I'm having a hard time finding a green in this size. I believe this was like an 8-inch, as the red is clearly a 12-inch. That's definitely a foot long in diameter. So this traffic light, you know, this probably would have been used in town rather than on a highway, because usually the ones on a highway you'll notice that are usually all the same size. It would have been nice to try and find an arrow, because I could have replaced that with just a green arrow instead, just for something different. But anyway, I might find one. eBay seems to have a large plethora of them, but I'll take it day by day with that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to take an alcohol wipe. I think I'm just going to mount it right here. That way my power in line, when I do get a proper cable or whatever I decide to use, if I do mount it outside like my goofy drunken friends had mentioned to me. Okay, so if you don't have any alcohol wipes or anything like that, or if this traffic controller that you guys purchased doesn't come with alcohol wipes, you can just use simple wax and grease remover. Is usually what I carry in the shop. So I'm just taking a normal rag here, just going to wipe it down. Now I had already cleaned this traffic light out with just some ordinary automotive cleaner that I have at the shop for detailing, just to kind of get the dead bugs out of it or whatever. So I'm just, like I say, I'm just wiping this down. If yours is corroded, or if it has corrosion in it, you could probably just get away with using this wax and grease remover just to clean the entire thing out. But I'm not too fussy. You don't see it. It's an old traffic light, so it brings a little bit of history behind it, I guess you could say. I was actually contemplating on giving it a paint job. Now you'll notice if you have a plastic one, because they do actually make these in plastic, some of the newer ones, just so they're lightweight or whatever, you'll notice if it's painted that you'll notice some paint on your rag that'll come off. So if you have a plastic one, just be aware of that. See, I'm rubbing my fingers against it now. You know, they're actually fairly clean now. As of before, I'd take my finger, rub across it, and there'd be like a white chalk. So that's no good. It's not clean enough if that's the case. So that's all I'm doing with this. It's just alcohol, wax and grease remover, sorry. I'm just cleaning this up a little bit. Kind of notice that it is starting to remove the finish. But like I say, it does need to be cleaned. So anyway, that's good enough for that. Just rub my finger against it once more. Yeah, so that's better. Okay, I'll set that aside. Now I'm going to take these little adhesives. The garage is actually minus 32 out last night, so I'm just waiting for the ambient temperature to warm up in the garage. The steel, it's not too bad. It's actually getting warmer. I'm just going to wait a few minutes before I decide to stick those on there. It should be at room temperature for that, so if you are farting around your garage and it is cold and it is wintertime, you might want to just let the steel warm up a little bit, or take it to your basement and do it there. Okay, so the very bottom here, there's a little adhesive. There's just a protective cover on that. Now you could put the little mounts on the traffic light, but what makes it a little easier is if you just go ahead and insert it into the back of your traffic light controller, just ever so gently. We don't want to, you might need to put a little bit of finger pressure on that, but you just, you don't want to overdo it. Just give it a little bit of, wiggle it back and forth. There we go, until it snaps. And do that with the other three. That way you can just remove the backing plate of the adhesive, the little protective cellophane, and then you can just go ahead and just stick it where you want it. That way you're not measuring, that way your mounts aren't in the wrong position or anything like that. So here's the third one. Just very gently, don't push in the center of the motherboard. Anybody who has ever taken computer class or worked with the IT technician in high school, he'll tell you that not to push in the center of the motherboard when you're doing something like this, or you'll risk breaking the motherboard. They're not exactly a strong, sturdy device. So I'll go ahead with the fourth one. They say they need a little bit, but not too much. So now I'm just going to turn these that they're in the right position, and that they're not going to look lopsided or anything like that. And basically that's all there is to it. Now I can go ahead and remove these and position it inside my traffic light where I want it. Alright, so essentially it should just look like this, and it gives you quite a bit of clearance between the traffic light. The manufacturer does state for this particular controller that it does produce a little bit of heat, upwards of 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really shouldn't be mounted directly steel against the motherboard, let's say. So it should have a little bit of ground clearance. So now is the time where you'd need to figure out where exactly you want your wires to be mounted. So see here, this traffic light, the conduit, clearly at one point the wire would run through the conduit and into the top of the traffic light, as does most. There's two large bolts, 9/16, I believe, up top, that would usually, in reality, mount to your arm. So if I mount it like this, technically by rights, all three wires for green, yellow, and red will come up through the conduit here, up through here, and go into the bottom, and then your line in, your power supply, would just come through this top conduit and into the side. You could mount it technically like this, and then have your line come in from your top conduit directly into the side, and then mount your three for your red, green, and yellow in the side, or you could mount it over here, like so. That would also be sufficient. And then you could have lots of room here for your wiring. You wouldn't have to worry about having anything bunched up. But the thing is I think I'll mount it directly in the center, because when you close the module door, or whatever the geeks like to call this, is that, you know, you could risk the chance of binding some wires right up against the controller. So I think what I'll do is I'll mount it directly in the center, and that way if I do decide to change the flash cycle, all I have to do is pull this top little tab here and push these buttons. I'll get into that a little later on, but this does come off of here, and then you can push the button This is for your yellow delay, and this is your program. So my neighbor, he loves Paul McCartney and all that crap, and he listens to, you know, anything British and anything from the UK. So you can actually program the traffic light to operate like a traffic light from the UK. So, but anyway, when you're done programming it, you can simply just push this back on here. So in the event of a power failure, or you turn the power off to your traffic light, next time you plug it in, it'll go back to standard mode, which is actually #1 on the program list. I believe this specific controller has 25 different modes. Some of them will act like a pedestrian crossing. Some of them will act like a tree at like a racetrack, where it'll go green, yellow, or sorry, red, yellow, and then green. Or you can also make it flash green and red and make it alternate like a railway crossing. We'll get into that a little later on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the little protective cellophane here on each of the feet of my mount, just like so. I went ahead and just went at it with the wax and grease remover one more time to ensure that it was nice and clean. I also kind of gave myself a few minutes to try and let the steel warm up. It's really cold outside. The furnace has been running steady in here. So there we go. We're ready to mount our traffic light controller. Alright, so I've decided that I'm going to mount it like this, vertically, up and down. So my traffic light modules, the wiring will go on the bottom and the line in will go on the side. So I'm going to just, I'm not sure if these mounts are 3M tape or what they are, but regardless, we'll just hope that it sticks. Because I'm sure if they do stick well, you won't be able to remove it. I'm going to try and mount it directly in the center of the traffic lights. Seem to stick fairly well, actually. No, I'm not putting any pressure on it. It's just kind of sitting there on its own. I want to make sure it's nice and level, because my OCD, or my CDO as I like to call it, CDO is in alphabetical order, the way it should be when it comes to OCD. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to apply not a tremendous amount of pressure, just a little firm on the corners of my module, or my traffic light controller. I'm just going to wiggle it back and forth to see that it's going to stick. And then I'm just going to push on the feet itself. I'm going to reach my finger in behind and just push against the mounts, the feet of my mounts, and just try and push it that way a little firmer, because that's obviously something we don't care if they break. We do care, however, if we break the motherboard itself, so we don't want to do that. So I'm just pushing light pressure, moderate to light pressure on my mounts. I don't see that being a problem. I think that'll stay exactly where it's supposed to. I don't think that's going to come loose. Thing is it does produce heat, and if I do mount this outside, the summer heat might make it loosen up a bit, but it might be permanent. She might stay there for good. Well, that's fairly good just like that. So now I'm going to open up this last module. This is for my green. Unfortunately, I'm not going to hook it up because I know it doesn't work, and with there being water inside the module, as you can kind of tell here, I don't want to run it. I don't want to apply current to that. Okay, so we'll start with our yellow, because we know that semi-quasi works. There was a triangle missing out of it, but you know what? Thanks to LED technology, I guess, you know, if it works, it'll partially work, I suppose. So I'll run that. That yellow wire is the main power lead, and the neutral is here. There's two ways you can hook this up. You can connect all your neutrals together and simply connect your neutrals into your neutral block here on your controller. So basically you'd have 3 neutral wires for your green, yellow, and red, and then you'd have a neutral wire coming in here, so you can twist cap with a Marette them all together and then just plug your neutral wire into that. Or it gives you the option, these are all neutrals here as well. So I believe the right of your connector here, the connection block is line, neutral, and then so forth. So you can plug all the neutrals in independently to each particular spot. It doesn't matter as long as the neutrals are connected to something. I mean, it'll work just as fine. So for this, for example, this is the for the yellow. So you just simply plug that into the bottom of this, and then just simply connect the screw. Tighten it down nice and snug. You don't want it loose, of course. And then your power. I'm going to have to take a close up and make sure that that's exactly where they go. I'll let you know that in a second. But you get the general idea. And then your red, that's the same scenario as well. So your traffic light modules, usually the color codes are for each particular light. Alright, so this is for a red. So as we can take note here, you will have a manual with yours, so don't ever panic if you're not an electrician or you just don't have knowledge with this kind of stuff. Don't panic. It gives you nice detailed diagrams. They're not going to leave you hanging high and dry without some kind of diagrams. So the neutral wires, very simple. They're on the right side of the controller. So this one being our red, we can see clearly on the motherboard, just underneath the block, that it does say red. So this is obviously for a red light, and you would plug your neutral into the right side of the block. I'm going to fix this wire here, so just bear with me. So that's just for demonstrational purposes. That'll go in there, and then for your live, it'll simply go on the left. So it'll go in there. These wires are color coded and they correspond with each particular module. So in layman's terms, the red wire is obviously for your red light. The amber also has a yellow wire, that's your power lead. The green actually has a brown wire. I'm not sure if all of these traffic light modules are like that, or just so happens to be this one, but you can't mess them up. So just remember that, if it's a red light, red is hot. If it's a yellow light, yellow is hot. And all the whites, those are your neutrals. Like, it's very straightforward. You really can't mess this thing up. And what you want to try and do is try and get the strands short as possible and get the exposed strands inside the block as best you can. You don't want them to be exposed, just prevents any shorting. Okay, do the same for the red. And simply snug it up. Don't put too much pressure on it. You got to remember these motherboards, all they are is soldered circuitry. So you can tell that, if you can turn these very easily. So if you're really hoarse on it, you could potentially loosen the solder or break it from behind the motherboard. So you don't want to put too much pressure on it, but at the same time you want your wires snug, that they're not going to bounce around or come loose or anything like that. And do the same for your neutral wire for your amber. Try and keep them as neat as possible. Neutral goes on the right. And if the strands are too long, just shave them off a bit. And do the same for the yellow wire. Insert and tighten down. We'll have to use our imagination for the green because I'm not hooking it up, but same scenario. Neutral first, or on the right hand side of the motherboard block, and then your hot wire, which would be either brown or green, it would connect into the left side of that block. Very simple. When you're done tightening them down, just give them a little tug, not too much where you're going to either yank the wires out or take the whole block with you and disconnect the feet up here, because that adhesive might take a good few minutes to make sure it really sticks, especially if the steel isn't exactly room temperature. So we can tell that our wires are good there. Now I'm missing the green wires, of course, so you know, like I say, I don't have green for this traffic light yet. I'm gonna have to order a new module. But our plug cord. Now you're not gonna use a cord like this, okay? Quite obviously. But I'm using this for testing purposes, so I'm going to use this just to try it. And normally in your case, or in my case, once I get the proper wiring, you would connect a ground wire with a self-tapper screw. Just grind this down with a wire wheel or whatever you have, or a little Dremel if you have one. And you don't need to make a big large grind here. You don't want, because it's just going to rust anyway, so you want to just, you know, a small spot with a self-tapping screw. I'll get into that later if I can find an actual proper wire for this. Okay, so we have all this the way we want it. I have this power cord here. Plug it in. Green, yellow, red. I think it'll flash that a couple of times. What we have here in the center of the motherboard, there's a little dial here. This is for your delay. It's actually set on the minimum right now, so I guess with it set that way, it's just going to do this minimum cycle. And we got to remember, I have no green, so we just have to pretend. So when the traffic light goes out, that's our green, but I just don't have one, and it just doesn't work right now. So that's no good. That's a little too fast. We want this thing to look authentic, so I'm gonna pull the power to that. I'm going to take this screwdriver here, and I'm just going to simply coax this timer. I'm just going to turn it up a wee bit. So you can see the dial is turning. I'm going to turn it to there. I'm going to try it. I'm going to apply power to it again. Now I'm also going to program the yellow delay, because we don't want the delay to last. We want it to be as realistic as possible. So the delay for a standard traffic light on a 30-mile-an-hour road, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 seconds, no more than 4. On something on the major highway that's over 55 mile an hour, it might be maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds, maybe 5 seconds for the amber, because there's a lot of, you know, traffic is obviously going faster at that point. So I'm going to apply power. So we have our red. Right now I'm going to just close the door a little bit. We're going to see how long that takes. Apparently you can set it up to about maybe, I think the manual said about 3 minutes. So it's definitely taking a little longer with the red. Like I say, we want this to be somewhat realistic. Okay, so that would technically be our green. So I'll have to wait a few seconds. We'll have to program our yellow. There's yellow, and then there's red. So our yellow or amber is quite fast. So it's just a little faster than what it should be. I mean, if that were to happen on a real traffic light, you know, there'd be a lot of red light runners, and there'd be probably a lot of fines if the police were actually dirty enough to try and catch somebody to do that. So our delay for our red or amber is a little fast, and for changing that, we can simply push our red delay, and apparently it'll flash. So I pushed it 3 times. I believe you have so much time to push the yellow delay button before it reverts back to 1 second, according to the book. So we'll just take a few seconds here, and we'll just see how fast our amber is and see if it actually programmed correctly. Okay, so there would be technically our green. And you can turn that dial back if you want, just to make it dance a little bit faster. If you actually want to see some action out of it. Having it set at the minimum just doesn't seem realistic to me, so I just don't want to be bothered having it set to that. It's more of a chase that way. There's amber. And there's red. So that's more realistic for in-town traffic lights. So I think I'll leave it at that. I'm going to close this module door, and we'll just, maybe I'll turn it back a little bit for demonstrational purposes so this video isn't an hour long. Alright, so I shut down one bank of lights here just to kind of give it a nighttime kind of a look, what it would look at night. So I adjusted my amber up a little bit. I think it's about 4 seconds. Gives it a little bit more of a realistic amount of time that a typical traffic light would take. It really sucks that I don't have green, but like I say, you just have to use your imagination. But I'm quite happy with that, just as a man cave item. It definitely is a conversation starter. I'll take a few seconds here and wait for amber and red, because it's the only two that work here. There's amber. And there's red. So it's a little more realistic. Now with this, you have a lot of options. You can really get your traffic light to have whatever sequence you desire. And to change all that, you just simply pull that jumper wire up at the top there, and then you just cycle through the program buttons. I'm not really too certain on how this totally functions yet, but I will just, for demonstrational purposes, I'll pull that jumper pin, just set it down there, and then I'll push the program button once. So I believe there, it just went from red to yellow. I believe this might be the UK style. I haven't really gone over all this, but I mean, like, it's a plug and play thing. So you can really, you know, take the time and just play around with it. There's lots of different modes. See, there's red and then amber and then green. So technically that'd be your UK style sequence. So you got a whole list of them here. Yeah, see here we have it on mode 2 now at the moment, which is our British traffic light. So what would happen is it would go red, and then red to amber, and then green, and then amber, and then red, and then it would follow that sequence. So right now it's green, it's amber, and there's our red. If we give it a few seconds, it'll light up the amber light. But then we got a whole bunch of other goofy things that we can try. I mean, it's like I say, it's not very, you know, if you're looking to have like just as a party light or whatever in your basement or whatever, or in your bar, let's say you have a bar. See, there's red and amber, and then it would go to green. So that's our British style. And when you're done, just restow the jumper wire. Shouldn't do this with the power on, but I'm a rebel without a cause, so just like that. We'll close our module door.